Well, today we are almost coming to the end of our February chapter in our Red Letter Road. Again, if you're new with us today, we've been on this journey really since last September, asking ourselves, well, what does Jesus say? And if you looked at some older types of Bibles, all the words of Jesus were in red. So we decided to call this sort of journey, this whole year at church, we want to get on the red letter road where we discover what Jesus says. It's amazing, right? We talk about faith, we talk about God, and a lot of people still don't really know what Jesus said. And I think if you really want to know about God, you got to know what Jesus says. So today, in this chapter in February, we've been looking at what Jesus says about how do we love each other in the thick of it. And we all know what the thick of it is, right? The thick of it is a great phrase for what? Well, it's when things are messy, when things are hard, when relationships kind of go sideways. What do we do in the thick of it? And just let's have a small raise of hands. Have you been in a relationship where you said, oops, I'm in the thick of it? Come on now. You've never been in a relationship that's been at all difficult at all? Oh my goodness, some of you are, okay, I'm not going to use the word, but you're in denial, okay? Because I am convinced if you live and walk on the face of this earth, every single one of us at some time, possibly right now, are going to face a situation where you say, oh my goodness, I'm in a difficult moment with this relationship. I'm in the thick of it. Well, with that said, today we want to talk actually about when we get in the thick of it with our marriages. And today I want to talk about, we're going to call it Stuck Together. I hope that you have a teaching outline and you can make some notes as we go along and you can reflect on those later. You might say, wow, that's such an inspiring title about marriage, because we're going to talk about marriage. That's right. It's interesting. We know that there was a passage that Jesus, again, we're going to look at Jesus' words today, where Jesus talks about being stuck together in marriage. And let me just read this right now. It's found in Matthew 19, verses 4 to 6. So let's just read this. Haven't you read, he replied, that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. So there's that stuck together. Jesus says, hey, you get married, you're stuck together. You know, as we've just gotten past Valentine's Day, and hopefully it was celebrated for all those who are in relationships, but I just want to sort of make a caveat here, because I know for some of you today, you say, well, I'm single. What has this got to do with me? And I'm looking at all these young adults out here who are not married yet, or maybe they may say marriage isn't going to be part of my storyline. Well, give it time. But here's the thing, is that if you're single today, I just want to say to the single people that if you're single today, you still should pay attention, because one, some of you will probably get married one day, so you want to be able to go, well, what did Pastor Dave say back in February of 2019? I got to remember that. That's what I dream every once in a while. That's what people think. But it's good to process and think about, if you want to have faith in God in your marriage, it's good to know what Jesus says about marriage, right? Secondly, some of you may, as I say, be committed to being single, and that's fine. Jesus speaks about that too. But here's the reality. A lot of your friends will eventually tie the knot, and they're going to need someone to talk to when they are struggling in their marriages. And you can say, well, you know, it's interesting. I can remember when Pastor Dave spoke back in February 2019. He talked about, anyway. The third thing is this, though, and I really don't want you to lose sight of this, is that the truths that we're going to just take a few minutes to discover today that apply to marriage are relational truths that apply to a lot of our other relationships as well. So it's called transference. You can kind of take this marriage relationship truth and actually apply it to friendships and to your neighbors and to your brothers and sisters in Christ at a church, to any environment. Some of these truths will be applicable, okay? So back to what Jesus said. What God has joined together, let no one separate. Now, it's interesting. This is an old piece of technology, and I just put it together very quickly. But does anybody know what this is? Plumb line. Very good. So this deals with when you're in construction, when you're dealing with issues of verticality. That's my big new word for the day, verticality. But basically what it does is, if you're building a wall, for example, rather than trying to build a brick wall and eyeball it, and we all know what that would look like, especially the longer the wall goes, you just hang a plumb line next to the wall you're building, and what will you get? You'll get a straight wall, because this is your guide. This is your standard. Well, in the outline there, Jesus gives us what we call a relational plumb line, one to gauge ourselves against. He says, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. And they're no longer two, but one. What Jesus speaks about here is the coming together of a male and female in a profound vow, coming together in a deep covenant. And if you're not used to using the words vow and covenant, what Jesus is saying is, when a man and woman come together and make the strongest possible promise ever to each other, that is what was God's intent. There's a simpleness to the words here. David Stone comments on this passage. He says, notice the husband leaves his parents, he's united to his wife, and they weave this intimate union as they merge themselves together physically. And the merging is not instantaneous. Note the words here that Jesus, remember, is quoting Moses here. He says, they will become one flesh, not they became one flesh. Did you notice that? They'll become. There's a process, a journeying together. Oneness is not created overnight, even on a honeymoon night. Marital oneness is a lifelong spiritual, emotional, and sexual quest. Jesus' teaching here is a powerful reminder that he gives us a basic plumb line as we are trying to build that marriage forward. And that basic plumb line is this: it's permanency. It's permanency. Being stuck together in a way that creates deep connection and completeness. Now, if you're looking at that passage and hearing Jesus' words, remember, we're on the red letter road here. We're listening to what Jesus says about marriage. He starts off with saying, and you got to understand, sometimes when you're reading a passage of Jesus and we pull it out for you, it's always good to go back and look at what we call the context. And the context was this, is that there were some religious teachers trying to trap him in a question, but asking, is there any reason, a good reason really, why a husband should divorce his wife? And what's interesting, of course, is that marriages dissolved back 2,000 years ago, and that's something we have in common. Maybe our technology, our roads, and our internets are all different. Obviously, they didn't know any of that. But boy, where we share common ground with them is that marriages were dissolving back then, and marriages dissolve today. And what Jesus is reminding them of is that it was God's intent. It was God's creational intent that the marriage would actually stay together. That this is how he created. In fact, Brent Hudson, our teaching pastor, made a note. He said, there's a theologian that has actually said this, that when what we can see in a relationship when a man and woman come together in marriage is the complete image of God, because God created us in his image, male and female, he created them. So when a man and woman come together, we see actually a complete image of God. See, this is God's plan. Now, I recognize, and we all recognize here, that we have all these forces in our broken world that wants to tear away at marriages. We can look at all the reasons why marriages need to end. But what I just want to remind us today is, let's go back to the very beginning, because the beginning is a very good place to start. And when we go back to the very beginning, we are reminded that God's intent was that for this reason, a man and woman shall come together, leave their parents, be united together. And by being united together, they're honoring God and they're honoring themselves. You know, as we think about this brings us to our rule today that we're going to learn from Jesus. And it is a rule because it's just like the plumb line, right? You know, some people hate plumb lines or standards because you go, well, I don't like that standard. I don't like that. Well, it doesn't, I don't care if you like it or not. It is what it is. And the rule today is this: love sticks together. Love sticks together. That's the plumb line for our marriages. Now, the challenge is for us to accept that this is the life God wants for our married lives. The question is whether or not, when we are trying to build our lives, will we align our lives to God's plumb line? You know, let's not lose focus of Jesus' teaching. Now, I know for those of you who know the wider scriptures, yes, there's places where the Bible talks about exceptions around dissolving a marriage. But what I want you to not lose sight of today is the trajectory, the intent that all of us should walk into every marriage with. The intent is that love sticks together. This is what God desires. In the midst of all the voices and examples in our world around us, do we hear Jesus saying there's a godly vision for our marriage? Not just your vision. God has a vision for your marriage, for every one of our marriages, and for the future marriages that are sitting here today. Love sticks together. Well, that's the call. In fact, if we had a wrap up right now, you could say, okay, there's the point. Jesus says love sticks together. You know, there's the plumb line. There's the thing. But now let's just pause for a moment and move from the plumb line to the problems that we encounter with marriage. And I could just say, yeah, we have problems in marriage that we have, or I could sound very psychological and say there is gender relational disharmony that occurs in marital unions. But that's just trying to sound sophisticated. Or maybe I could just tell you a story. So let me tell you a story. A woman who died found herself standing outside the pearly gates being greeted by St. Peter. She asked him, oh, I can't believe it. Is this the place? It's so beautiful. Did I make it to heaven? To which St. Peter replied, yes, my dear, these are the gates to heaven. But you must do one more thing before you can enter. The woman was so excited, and she asked St. Peter, what must I do to pass through the gates? Spell love, St. Peter replied. The woman promptly replied, well, that's so easy. L-O-V-E. Welcome, St. Peter exclaimed. Peter then said, listen, I know this is crazy, but I still have to visit the men's room. So would you watch the gates for me? And remember, if anyone wants to enter, make sure he or she spells that word. So the woman is left sitting in St. Peter's chair, watching the beautiful angel soaring around her when the woman's husband appears at the gate. What are you doing here? The woman asked him. He replied, dear, I was so heartbroken when you died that I died instantly. What do I need to get in? To which the woman replied, oh, that's simple. You just need to spell one word. Well, what's the word, he asked. The woman responded, Czechoslovakia. You know, more women laugh at that joke than men. I don't see the guys laughing so much here. So let's take that fun story and understand that as much as we have the plumb line, we're supposed to love sticks together, right? There's permanency. We know that we have lots of Czechoslovakia problems in our marriages, right? We have Czechoslovakia moments. There are dynamics and expectations and gender roles and social constructs and family backgrounds and patterns and dysfunctionalities and all of life situations that all add up to forces working against you and me from keeping a marriage permanent. In a best-selling book by Jamie Turndoff called Till Death Do Us Part, Unless I Kill You First, in her book, she seeks to create an understanding of the dynamics and responses of marital conflict. She highlights all the possible areas for stress and strife. And again, if you're married, you're going to go, yeah. Your head's going to start shaking here. And for those of you who aren't married, you're going, oh my goodness, this is really complicated. But here are all the possible areas for stress and strife, according to Jamie Turndoff, when you enter into a marriage. Okay? So, displaying affection, sex, emotional intimacy, You're shutting me off. You're shutting me out. Leisure time and vacations. Jealousy. I saw you talking to her. Household chores. Am I the only one here that does dishes around here? Lack of follow-through. Lack of initiative. Parenting. In-laws. Friendship relations. Values. Lack of cooperation. Control freak moments. Money. Power struggles. You never listen to me. Now, the thing is, I just listed 17 possible areas for conflict on an ongoing weekly basis in any marriage that's sitting in this room. And the thing is, they come in all various mutations and themes, just like a revolving Rubik's Cube of crazy. And that's what we have to navigate. Those are forces at work. And what it does is, it leads us to those Czechoslovakia moments. You see, what happens is that we go in, we walk down the aisle, whether it's in a park or in a garden or a beach or in the more traditional setting of a church. And we say, let what God has joined together, let no one separate. Love sticks together. A man and a woman bound together in the holy matrimony of love. And then we walk out that door. And all these forces start to pull away at us and tug and challenge us. And what we come to, if you're following the outline, is we come to that place where we say, listen, I didn't sign up for this. This is the unknown. See, it's amazing, right? That you make this promise, and the only thing that you take with you into the unknown is the promise. You don't have no guarantee that your future is going to be all just rosy and wonderful, like a painting. When we make a vow of permanency, we are making it in the face of an unknown future. Now, here's what's tough. Let's just get honest. It's 21st century. Let's talk like big people now. We live in a culture, right, that contracts and promises and guarantees, well, we don't really mean it, right? I mean, we always know there's always an escape clause, right? Come on. Yeah, I'll sign that. Well, we'll see what happens in court. Yeah, I'll make a promise. Yeah, maybe I'll follow through, unless something better comes along. We don't live in a culture now where, well, in the old days, going back in another time of Florence's life, handshake was good as a person's word. That's all you need. Didn't need all these fancy contracts and 5 lawyers, and don't want to knock lawyers, but inside joke, my son just became a lawyer. And you see, I think that sometimes when we come to this time and we hear Jesus talking, it almost sounds weird to us. Where he says, don't you know God wanted you to stay together, that love sticks together? That's basically what Jesus is saying to us. And we're saying, really, Jesus? Really? Do we really want to take seriously that God's plan for our marriages, because God created man and woman to come together, that maybe God has a plan that he knows how to build the marriage the best way, and the very first thing he says is, stay together? You know, what this reveals is that often when we make promises and vows, we put a limit on what we mean by our vow of where love will take us. I will love you as long as you keep doing this for me. I will love you as long as you don't do this to me. So we have a lot of built-in conditions. Whereas the pledge of sticking together reveals a willingness, now catch this big word, unconditional love. There are no conditions. You love because you love because you love. I mean, it's wonderful to say to your spouse, I love you because you have wonderful hair. I love you because you have big muscles. I love you because you're so smart with the computer. I love you that you can paint a room. It's great that you can say all those things, but really, what if someday they aren't smart with the computer? And what if their hair falls out? I know, awful, awful thought. But those things happen. So what, do you stop loving them? Because that's really what you're saying to them. I love you because you can do all this. At some point, real love says, I love you because I love you because I love you because I love you. And that is that unconditional love. See, that's why I'm quite a stickler. I've done a few marriages. I'm okay. Look, if you want to have butterflies flying around our head, fine. If you want to wear rose petals, wear a dress too. But I mean, but if you want to wear rose petals in your hair, whatever. But one thing I'm a stickler on is when they say, well, we want to write up our own vows. I say, nope. No. You want me to do your wedding? These are the vows I want you to say. And they go, oh, Pastor Dave, you're getting kind of, growly on us. I go, yeah. And here's the vows that I absolutely believe every couple should say. I take you, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and health, till death do us part. None of this, well, the skies are blue and the birds are flying through the air and the rainbow of love is over us. If you want to say that some other place in the ceremony, go ahead. But when you're making a promise, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and health, till death do us part. Because love sticks together. Right? I wasn't, but hey, people want to fly. That's great. Okay, so here we go. Let's just finish up here. I got 8 minutes. When a couple walks down now, here's the thing I think though, that I want to turn this into a bit of a teaching moment for all of us, and please hear this. What I'm saying, I'm looking at Dave first. I'm looking in my own mirror. So please, I'm not just shooting it out at you. But let's think about flawed responses, but that often creates the Czechoslovakia problems in our marriages, the poor tactics for partnership. Is that what we fail to see is this, and please hear this. When a couple walks down the aisle after making the covenant for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, what they are often failing to see is that somehow they think that it's magically all going to work out. But what they don't see is that a marriage is still made up of two individuals with opposing needs, wishes, goals, and opinions. And here's a baseline of describing conflict. When there's a clash of needs, wishes, goals, and opinions, conflict and angry feelings are to be expected. Sometimes we think, oh, we're having a conflict in our marriage. I guess our marriage is going bad. No, actually it just means you're human, and it means that you're two individuals, and you've got to work out the differences of opinions, needs, wishes, goals, and you got to navigate it. And at times you're going to get angry and you're going to get upset when you have a block goal or when you aren't getting your way. Why? Because we're frail people, right? Jesus had to die for sinners, not for angels, right? But what happens is that we use poor tactics when we get into those conflictual moments rather than saying, and I know this sounds crazy, but when you're in a conflict, you can say, hey, if we can work through this, we're going to learn more about each other. We're going to get more intimate. We're going to understand one another. Yay, we're having conflict. Be careful, guys. Don't be too excited about conflict that way, but so what happens is we end up going to poor tactics. And I'll be honest with you, we learn these poor tactics often from our parents and grandparents, or we learn it from our societal cues, or we learn it because of our own personality weaknesses. But here are some remember that long list I gave you about possible areas of conflict? Well, here are poor tactics in dealing with conflict. Counter-blaming, verbal attacking, score-keeping, winners, losers, someone has to win, someone has to lose. I'm right, you're wrong approach. Character assassination. Using the global terms. You always do this. You never do that. How about kitchen sinking? You ever hear about kitchen sinking? You start with one problem and then you just throw all the other problems in. You're late and you've never fixed the sink, and I don't like your mother-in-law. That's called kitchen sinking, okay? Oil on the fire, just throwing more and more incendiary statements on already a conflictual moment, hitting below the belt, ancient history, power play, exploding, and recruiting allies. Well, I told my friends on Facebook that you did this, and they all agreed with me. Now, those are horrible tactics for trying to develop a partnership. And by the way, remember I was saying that these truths can apply to other relationships? All of those things I just told you hurt any relationship. Friendships, work situations, family dynamics. The list continues, by the way. The second list is what we call, those are the overt tactics. Here are some covert tactics that we use, again, in our marriage and in other relationships. Listen, guilt trip, silent treatment, withholding, silent sabotage, I told you so, sarcasm, ambusher, indirect digs, and the famous trinity of them all, nagging, whining, and complaining. Now listen, I only listed all these things. I've listed all these poor tactics, both the overt ones and covert ones, simply to highlight this. All these things can tear away at the permanency of marriage. They can all tear away at it. They erode it. And you and I need to pay attention and understand that we have to navigate these dynamics. We just can't pretend they're going to go away. Well, that leads me just to the final thing. I've talked about the plumb line. The plumb line is that what? Love sticks together. Actually, let's say that together. Love sticks together. Just take that into your marriage today. And if you're going to get married someday, take that thought. Love sticks together. And then we talked about all the problems that tear away at marriage, but let's finally talk about a pathway towards permanency. Here's the first one. It's about engaging conflict. Engaging conflict. How do we do that? Well, there's three ways you can engage conflict, right? You can either flee from it, you can fight through it, or you can figure it out. So how do we engage conflict? I just want to highlight one thing about, I'm going to just do a study that this turned off, highlighted. I just want to highlight something to both men and women here. According to one study cited in Turndorf's book, Till Death Do Us Part, there's actually a chemical reaction that goes off in male brains when they are in a stressful, conflictual situation. Whether this is genetic wiring or social conditioning, the outcome is the same. It's called a male's autonomic nervous system kicks in. Adrenaline glands fire up, muscles become tense, perspiration, cognitive abilities diminish. A male is hyperactive to stress, hyperreactive to stress. And it's not about your personality, it's just that these studies have shown this. Now what's ironic is that they'll study females and look at their what's called autonomic nervous system in the same conflictual situation, and they'll actually say a woman's one is actually calmer. She may be frustrated, she may be very intense about the argument, she may be displaying intense emotions, but her autonomic nervous system is actually very calm. The guy is internalizing and ready to go. Now, what happens in a moment like that? Think about engaging conflict. The woman is making an intensive demand, emotional demand about something that needs to be dealt with. And the guy is in fight or flight mode. And initially, he usually freezes, has a glazed look over his eyes. He's coming home from work, walks in, where's the milk? What's in your hand? Pop. Doesn't that store sell milk? Yes. What should I do now? Not that that's ever happened to you. Now here's the point, is that you need to understand those dynamics. You need to understand the background dynamics. You need to know each other's family history about how you as families dealt with conflict growing up. Maybe one family just shut it all down and pushed it all down, and another family yelled it all out. Well, you got to figure all that out. You got to talk it out. Can I make a couple of quick observations about engaging conflict? Here's the thing, just real tips. Avoid the you word. Don't say you got a problem. You better get it figured out. Try an icebreaker when you're stepping into a conflictual moment. Is this a good time to talk? Frame the problem this way always. When this and this happens, I feel this. That's huge. Not when you do this, you make me. No. When this and this happens, I feel this. And in the future, can we move forward about this and this? Does that sound fair to you? That's the reason why we're offering Stronger Marriage Nights on the last Sunday of every month. Unfortunately, it's canceled tonight because of the storm. But next month, come. Learn skills. Make friends. For some of you, can I tell you honestly, you need to get counseling. You just need to go and get counseling. And there's no shame in that. Just to have someone partner with you and figure out and learn skills. And one final thing, can I encourage you to have friends within God's family so that you can encourage one another? Because out there in the world, we have so many other values and cultures saying, get rid of them. Walk away from her. Whereas in a church family, we're going to say, wait now, but God's intent is that we stick together and we can pray for one another, encourage one another. You need to have fellow Christian friends who will encourage you. Two final statements if you're going to find a pathway, a permanency for your marriage. Not only engage conflict, but also leave space for suffering. Let me just say this very simply. I think we live in a culture that says, if I'm not feeling comfortable, it's time for me to check out. And I think if I could just speak as a parent, I know that sometimes I wanted my children who were growing up to stay in that place of suffering and uncomfortableness. Why? Because I knew they were going to learn something in that. And I think sometimes we're going to have those hard seasons and hard valleys in our marriage, and we need to stay in that moment and say, God, what is it that you're trying to help me to learn? And not check out, because God's intent is permanency. We learn something in our suffering is what I'm trying to say. That brings me just to the last one, if we're going to find a pathway to permanency, is that the solution always includes me. See, when marriages really go bad, everyone's into what we call blame mode. You're the problem. You. It's you. You messed up. You. And all its point. But the moment I have a sense of humility and says, okay, God, what is it that you want me to do in this moment? And as a Christian, my first commandment is this. Jesus made it very simple. These are his words, the red letter road again. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you. I need to love like Jesus. And the more I look at how Jesus loves, he walked the second mile, he forgave, he spoke truth, he showed grace and mercy. The solution includes me.